everybody. This is Julie Oakes from the Results Realty Group at Layer Realty Partners. I am coming at you today with a really great guest today for my booming business interview. This is my good friend Greg Safford from Safford Insurance in Franklin, Mass. Right now, during everything that we're going through, I believe it is really important for us to do everything we can to support local business. And Greg is your local insurance guy. So I am so psyched he's here with me. We've known each other for a while, but this is the first time we've gotten together for this interview. So I'm pretty psyched to be able to do it finally. So how are you, Greg?
I'm well. Everything is going along well. I think we got a tiny bit of relief from the heat today, and it looks like next week will be nice. So
I'm not even go there. I'm not even going to go there because it's just too much for me. So I'd never be able to live in Florida.
No, I'm well. Life is good.
I agree. If we're all healthy and we're working, I feel like we don't dare complain.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. So the purpose of our interview today is to introduce people to you, your local business, and what you do. But really what I want people to do is to get to know Greg Safford and to know that, you know what, this guy's pretty cool. He knows what he's talking about. He knows insurance in and out. And so I feel comfortable calling him to even check my rates or anything. So I want people to get to know Greg Safford. So let's just jump into it.
Fire away.
So are you native to Franklin, Mass? Where did you come from?
I'm going to give the very short version of that by where I came from and then where I went before I got here. So I came from Spokane, Washington. It's about, we'll say roughly 30 minutes from Idaho, an hour and a half from Canada, about 5.5 hours east of Seattle, the dry, hot, and snowy side of the state. So I grew up there and then went to Alaska and then back to Spokane and then lived in Memphis for about 10 years and then moved here about 3.5 years ago now. It's time is flying.
That's pretty amazing. Wow, Alaska. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I did that for about a year. That was fun. I managed a division of a flight seeing company, which sounds really exciting. We did tour flights to Mount McKinley, but really a division of a flight seeing company up there means that I had a 12 by 12 log hut with no power. Well, it had a power. We had a generator that I had to put about a little quart of oil in a day to run it. So I could run the coffee pot or I could run a heater, a small heater. So it was a difficult decision which one you wanted, whether you wanted to stay warm or whether you wanted your coffee. The phone was an old-fashioned, unpowered, tethered to the wall phone line, and that was it. Nice airfield though.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was a good experience. A lot of fun.
Wow, you just kind of blew my mind there. I mean, I think we had talked about Washington before, but wow. Oh yeah, that's right. We talked about Nashville before too. Yeah. Wow, Alaska. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So
I've been lucky. I've had the opportunity to see a lot in the country.
I guess so.
It's a very big, very cool place.
So do you still have family out there?
So I have family in Washington, extended family in California, Montana, Connecticut. So my extended family's spread out quite a bit. But yeah, my folks and my sister, they all live in the Spokane area.
Oh, wow. Nice. So they live kind of close together.
Yeah, they do. Yep.
Cool. So what did your parents do for work when you were growing up?
So my dad was a mechanic, an auto mechanic. He had his own shop when I was little, and then went to work full time for the Washington State National Guard. So he was essentially Air Force. He did that until he retired. So he's been a mechanic as long as I've been around. My mom mostly stayed home to take care of us little, pain in the rear rugrats. Um, so that's what they did.
So also from when you were growing up or even now, who would you consider your mentors?
It depends on the subject. I've had a lot of different mentors. I've had, my degree was in music composition, so I've had a few folks there that have really helped me, both musically and personally. Just really nice, great people. Paul Halverson was a professor of mine that was fantastic. Joe Pittenger was a pastor I had when I was younger that did a really nice job of helping me sort things out sometimes. Professionally, it's very topic specific. So I have some folks that help mentor on the sales side. I have some folks that help mentor on the technical side. I've got one person I use specifically for property type, lesser risk type stuff. So if I have an odd question about something really specific about a condo master policy, that's who I go to for that. And then I have people that I go to for very specific other questions, flood insurance and so on and so forth. So it just really depends, but a lot of mentors, too many to name, but I'm very appreciative for all of them.
That's actually pretty amazing to have so many. And I know in what I do, I really value having the ability to go to those who are wiser and more experienced than I
would say for the most part, yeah. And I think for the most part, I guess I would say I'm a student of many, but a disciple of none.
Oh, okay. 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 So what do you do? What do you guys do for fun?
What do we do for fun? Well, I have 3 kids, so that's pretty much it. So if we play with the kids, we go around and do whatever. So that's what I do most
Whatever
of the time.
Whatever the kids do, I understand.
Right, exactly. Lately it's been a lot less, right, with COVID, but
right.
I do a fair amount of running. I like to run. Actually, I hate to run. I like what running does for me. I enjoy yard work. So, I'm usually tinkering with doing something out in the yard or a garden or something like that. I like to fish a lot. I just haven't had as much of an opportunity to do that lately. Used to do a lot of backpacking and outdoors type stuff. A little bit harder to do here in the Northeast. You have to go a little bit farther to find wide open space.
Right.
But yeah, that's definitely something I enjoy: camping, backpacking, hiking, mountain climbing, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you might have to go to another state to do that, but fortunately, the states are small. So
that they are.
That's really nice. So what is your favorite book and or movie?
Ooh.
I know for me that's hard to narrow down.
Yeah, because there's just no way to do a singular favorite, right? You can pick some that probably would be socially acceptable, as like your favorites, and everybody like, oh yeah, that's a great book. But realistically, every book brings something different. I would say, one of the best books I've ever read is How Bad Do You Want It? By Matt Fitzgerald. It's a book about running and endurance, but it has a lot to apply to your life as well. Crucial Conversations is a fantastic book. Crucial Conversations will change the way that you communicate with almost anyone. It is a scientifically based book. It is a short book, which works for me. Yeah. And, anyway, so that's a great read. If you haven't read Crucial Conversations, it's great. It's great for relationships, great for customers, it's just a great communication book. Gosh, and the list goes on and on. Movies. I'll move to movies. So many really great and really awful movies out there.
Well, what about a genre?
I'm pretty even. So I'll name a couple of movies. because I can do that. Sorry to hijack the question.
No, that's okay.
Like, I love Blues Brothers, one of my all-time favorite movies. It is all kinds of right and all kinds of wrong all in one movie, and it has great music, right?
Yes.
So that's one of my favorites. I love Spaceballs.
I do too.
Very different kind of comedy, absolutely
Yep.
hilarious.
We could
Amistad,
sit here and probably quote stuff from.
probably yes. I think Amistad is one of the most overlooked movies in the last probably 30 years. Steven Spielberg movie. It addresses, I don't know if you've seen it or not. It addresses
It's
a
a
lot,
fabulous movie. I love that movie.
in that movie. It's one of very few movies that's really,
Yeah, it's obviously heavy subject matter.
yes. So I thought that was a brilliant movie.
One of those that everyone should watch.
Another brilliant movie. So you're talking about genres, right? I'm all over the place. Another brilliant movie, and I don't recommend it for everybody. I will be upfront with that. It's one of those movies that I'll watch maybe once a decade at the most, because it is a brutal movie to watch. But Apocalypse Now, but get the Redu, the Redux version, because it has about another hour's worth of footage,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually ties a lot together. It's not as discombobulated as the original theater cut, so it makes a lot more sense. It's really a brilliant movie. It really walks through a lot about psychology, about how we handle stress, about, of course, the horrors of war. So yeah, so I'll stop with that. There are a few. It's very hard for me to narrow one down. They all have their own brilliance.
It's a challenging question, and I'll have to put that on my list because I've actually never seen that.
It's a hard watch. It's a hard watch.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some things that are tough to watch, but they're good for us to watch. And then there are some that just, make you laugh.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's good too. So what are you afraid of?
What am I afraid of? I guess, like, my greatest fear would be that somehow, and there's no indication that this would ever be the case, but that somehow, my little ones end up being self-centered, uncaring individuals. And there's no sign of that. So they're awesome kids. But like, that would be the one thing I would be afraid of, would be not doing well enough by them to help them reach their potential as awesome human beings.
I think that's something every parent should aspire to. I wish every parent did. I'm just speaking from what I see around the world. I'm guessing not every parent does that. But
it's tough. It's all relative too, right? I mean, different.
Yeah, it is.
It's probably easier for me to do it in some ways and harder to do it in others, than other people's circumstances. I'm very blessed. It makes it a lot easier.
One of the things I always say is, because my husband and I have 4 kids, and one of the things I always say is, as a parent, my job is to work myself out of job.
Right.
So you are self-sufficient and functional, and that's a pretty good goal for parenting.
That's it.
Pardon?
I said that's it. Yep.
How did you end up, because I know you've done more than one thing, how did you end up working in insurance?
Desperation. No, I'm kidding. It really wasn't that bad. When I came back from the aforementioned state of Alaska, I needed a job.
Yep.
And I had done bartending and I had done some banking, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to land in a permanent career job or if I wasn't sure what I wanted. So I called up my best friend and I said, "Hey, Mike, do you have any ideas for a job when I come back?" He said, "Well," he worked in an insurance agency because his dad was an insurance agent. And he said, "Well, I think the agency's hiring. Like, I'm sure we're going to need a receptionist, I think." I said, "Okay, I'll try that." So when I came back, I became the world's worst receptionist. I was awful. I was awful. Like if you ever see my resume come across as a receptionist, just torch it, burn it. Oop, are you getting a little bit of a video issue there?
Yeah.
Okay, let me,
Side. Yep.
okay, hold tight.
Audio's still
What's going on
clear.
there? Okay, the audio should be good. I'm just gonna go ahead and unplug and replug this here. Let's see if we can get,
Okay.
see if I can get that back.
Yay.
There we go. All right, that was odd. Joys of live video.
Right. That's okay. So you were the world's worst receptionist.
Yes. So I was.
In your words.
You know, fortunately, they recognized that I wasn't an awful person, and they decided they want to keep me around. So they moved me into some customer service work and some production, and kind of like, I don't know if you want to call it personalized management or whatever else, but so I did that for a while, and then I moved into the claims side of things for a large national carrier. Learned a lot about the back end of insurance, if you will. What happens when you need to use it. Then from there, went on to manage sales territories. Moved to Memphis as a result of that. Managed the West Tennessee sales territory for a major company. Then did a little bit of, I don't know if you want to call it, I guess I call it executive coaching. The company I was working for was trying to enroll a lean management practice. And so they had me working with mostly vice presidents, regional vice presidents on how to implement that.
Mm-hmm.
Then from there, I managed a large agency in Memphis, and then moved here and hung my own shingle. So there you go. That's how I got into it. How I got to where I'm at now.
It sounds like you pretty much learned the industry from the inside out.
I've done a lot of that. Yeah.
So
yeah, I have a pretty good perspective.
And you haven't, and that hasn't all been in Franklin, because you said you've only been in Franklin for a few years, right? So you were in Nashville for a time. Were you in there in Nashville when you started in insurance?
Well, I was in Memphis. No, I started insurance in
sorry.
Spokane. No, it's okay. It's all right. I don't know. I tried to figure it out the other day and just kind of, I wasn't able to quite do it. If I think about the number of agencies that I have worked with on the company side, been in the number of states that I've worked insurance-wise, I mean, I've probably worked in 30 states.
Oh, wow.
Or so I have a pretty broad, and it doesn't mean that I've worked heavily involved in those states. Like, I don't want you to think that I'm an expert on Kansas insurance policies.
Right.
But I've had exposure to a lot of different ways to do insurance as an agent and as an agency, and a lot of that was on the company side when I was working with. At one point in time, I think I had 380 agencies that were under my umbrella of responsibility, if you will. So I've seen a lot of ways to do it right and a lot of ways to do it wrong, and learned a lot.
Believe it or not, piggybacking on what you just said, learning a lot of ways to do it right and to do it wrong. That's when I am talking to people about you. That's actually one of the things that I use, because to me, that speaks of a really high knowledge of the industry in general, and the fact that you have really deep knowledge of other markets other than what we have here and the way they do things and their regulations and things like that, to me, that gives you a leg up on other insurance agents, because obviously regulations we have around here, but then also know what other states do, and just sort of how to work around for the best deal for your client, the most coverage for the least amount of money.
Yeah, and there are definitely advantages to it. Unfortunately, a lot of it doesn't translate to Massachusetts, because mostly what it does is it just reminds me how frustrating Massachusetts is from a regulatory standpoint. But
that's such a bummer.
But there are exceptions to that. I mean, I certainly have some relationships that I brought from the Mid-South and Tennessee and so on that have given me a leg up over other agents. I know brokers that can do things there that can't do things here. And sometimes I'll call up and be talking to a company or to a broker, and we'll say, hey, this is normal in other places. Is there any reason that we can't do that here? I know
Mm,
it's not normal here, but is there any reason we can't do it here? And sometimes I'll go, oh, you know, I hadn't really thought about that. I don't see why not. Let's go ahead. So
that's
it does have its
fabulous. I love that.
advantages. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. So, okay. So from there, who is your competition and what differentiates you?
I am my competition. Um,
And what does that mean?
it means that the only thing that gets in the way of my success, if you will, as an agent, and by the way, I define my success as essentially helping as many people as I possibly can be okay if something bad happens, right? Providing good customer service and a good value and doing it right. So um, the only thing that gets in the way of that is my processes, my personality, whatever. So there are a lot of great agents out there. There are a lot of really awful agents out there. And I don't view any of them as really my competition. You know, that's in other states. I would probably have said like your Geicos and your Progressives and your State Farms and all states nationwide. We don't have them in Massachusetts, and the only thing that they would really be competing with me for in those other states would be ad budgets. So I can run advertisements much less expensively in Massachusetts for insurance for geolocated ads like Google ads and Facebook ads that are targeted to Massachusetts. You know, my budget goes a lot further than it would in Tennessee, where you have a lot of, you know, Progressive and Geico and so on. You run down the whole list. There's a bunch of carriers that we don't have here that have massive war chests worth of ad budgets. So
Right.
they're buying up all the ad space, and you have to compete against that as a small agency. I do not have as many problems with that here in Massachusetts. So yeah. And then what differentiates me? Well, I guess it's important to know what differentiates me from other agents, even if I don't really consider them my competition. Um, and it's I love and I hate that question. And the reason that I hate it, I'll start with that one, is because it depends on who you're dealing with already, right? What might differentiate me from one agency is different than what differentiates me from a different agency. So let me just say, I always try to do what's right for the customer. Um, I mean, I spent, I think, 4 hours working the other day on a policy that I think my commission on is going to be $7. You know, it would have, most agencies would have said, no, we can't do that. Or I think a lot of agents would have said, no, I can't help you. Or, you know, why don't you try calling this guy, or that kind of thing. But the right thing to do was to help the client out, right?
The
They needed
right thing to
something, and
do.
I'm the person that can help
Absolutely.
them with, right? So I think that's probably one of the differences. I will absolutely tell somebody, hey, you're best where you're at. Here are the adjustments that you should make to your policy to be okay. I'm not sure why your agent didn't already recommend that, but you know, just go back and tell them to make these changes to the policy. You're in good shape. Um, I am thorough, or at least as thorough as I can reasonably be. So when you get a coverage review with me, you're not just getting a quote. I use the word quote just because people are familiar with it. I hate the word, because quote to me is all about price.
Right. And it
And
simplifies a complicated idea.
it does, and talk about simplifying a complicated idea. Here's an analogy for insurance that I hope really makes sense to everybody. Insurance is like a fire extinguisher. You buy it and you hope you don't use it, right? But if you need to use it, you want to know two things. You want to know, one, do I have the kind of fire extinguisher that puts out the type of fire that I have? And two, is it big enough, right? Nobody at the time of a fire looks at the fire extinguisher and goes, did I get the cheapest fire extinguisher? I really hope I did, because it saved me some money, right? It's just,
Right.
you know, now not everybody needs the world's biggest fire extinguisher. Every circumstance and every situation is different, right? You don't need a UL 300 kit, you know, like full commercial kitchen fire extinguisher in your house. That's overkill. It's not necessary. It's not appropriate.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we match those things, but I don't want to do it on the terms of pricing. I want to do it on the terms of value, which means getting the best bang for the buck for you for what you need. Um, I hope that makes
It makes
sense.
sense. And I think all that stuff you said that is, I think, the way, at least in my experience, that's the way you differentiate yourself. And that's what it says on your business cards. You are unique. Your insurance should be too. So,
There you go.
because, if you call, one of those other companies, they're not necessarily going to pick your current policy apart for coverage and the level of coverage and for what you need. Usually, and correct me if I'm wrong, usually when you're having that conversation, I would have to be the one to initiate those questions. Like, they wouldn't offer it.
Yeah, I think a lot of agents are order takers, right? I may ask for a copy of your insurance if you have it available. That's for me to compare and contrast to what's appropriate and explain what's different between what I'm suggesting and what you have currently, whether that's an increase or reduction in coverage or whatever else, right? It's mostly so that I can say, hey, here's what you have and here's my professional opinion. It's not so much, most agents would take that and then just match it. Right? Because they're selling based off of strictly price. They don't, and I don't want to say that they don't care about you. That's just the way that they've done it for so long that they don't know any different.
That's the way they're trained. That's what they're
right.
Instructed to do.
And I'll tag on to one extra piece of this, and I think it's also kind of important to think about the difference between an independent agent and a direct writer. So a direct writer would be like Liberty Mutual or Geico, where really they're representing a single company. And depending upon which company you're talking to, you may or may not get an agent that's yours. And I think that's really important too. Because when you call in and somebody takes your insurance order and they run your quote and and you sign off on everything, when you have a claim and you find out that they didn't do the best job of giving you good advice, right? You're never going to get that person on the phone again. They might not even work for the company anymore.
Right.
So they don't have that. Their responsibility is, and most of them try. I'm not saying that they do a bad job, but their responsibility is to their numbers, not to you.
Right.
I mean,
That's a very good point.
I had a customer, one of my companies wrote the policy direct and then assigned it to my agency. Sometimes they'll do that because I think they don't like the RMV process. So somebody's moving from another state into Massachusetts and they wrote the policy for me, which is great. And then they assigned it to my agency. So I called the customer to introduce myself and so on. And we had this really brief conversation. I said, did they talk to you about coverage? He said, no. He goes, I just told them I wanted the cheapest available and that's what they gave me. I said, okay, so I'm like, do you know how it works? Do you know what the coverage is? Well, not really. Like, isn't that enough? Like, minimum's supposed to be minimum for a reason, right? Like, isn't that because it's like the minimum you need to be okay? I'm like, no, it's not the minimum you need to be okay. It's the minimum you need to keep out of trouble with the cops. Like, that's what it is. It's different. And so we walked through the coverage, and I said, do you know that you could go from where you're at here, and you could get 10 times the coverage for $12 more a month? And he goes, no, they didn't explain that to me at all. So would you like me to process that? Oh, yes, I absolutely would, right? After the discussion about what it's worth. So I think that's the difference between, a lot of times that's just the difference between an independent agent and a direct writer. That person, whoever it was that you talked to at that company, is never going to talk to them again. They have no responsibility to them. So that's a differentiator between me and an online company or a direct phone company or somebody that doesn't have multiple companies to offer. All right, I digress.
No, it's right to the point of why we're here, because you are a local business.
Yeah.
And that's the whole gist of it as far as I'm concerned. And like my family, we've been using independent agents for, my husband and I have been married for 20 years. We've probably all but 3 or 4 of those years, we've used independent agents. One of the big companies wooed us in for a few years, offering us a discount because my husband went to Berklee College of Music.
Oh, yeah. They come with affinity discounts, yeah.
But then, a couple of years down the road, we were very safe drivers. Well, my husband's on the road for his job. So, occasionally life happens.
Sure.
but we're very safe drivers. And when we see the price just going up and up and up and trying to have a conversation, and it's difficult to have a conversation to get someone on the phone. We went back to the local insurance agent literally right before I met you, if you remember that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Right before I met you, I met a local agent, and that was it. We're just so much happier being able to call this same person and ask questions and things like that, rather than, sit on holds and you may or may not get a person. And I don't know. I just really recommend independent agents.
I think we have more skin in the game.
That's a very good point too. That's a really good point.
I will say that one of the struggles as an independent agent, especially in a small office like mine, it can be challenging sometimes because your workflow is not even, right? You might have a couple of days where things are pretty nice and you get everything's all good, and then all of a sudden everybody calls you on the same day for something crazy, right? And all of a sudden you now have a big backlog of workload, and it can be challenging to respond as quickly as you would with maybe one of those big companies, because they have giant call centers that are open 24/7.
Right.
So one of the things that some of us have done as independent agents is we've tried to provide more digital options for customers. So everything from emails to web forms to texting. A lot of agencies are not still texting. In fact, I know a lot of agencies. I talked to an agency the other day that was trying to figure out how to scan documents to send to a customer via email.
What?
Yeah, they were using fax for everything, and one of the customers said, "Well, I don't have a fax," and I guess they called me and they're like, "Do you know how to do this?" Yeah, I know how to do that. In fact, I'm not even sure what my fax number is. I've got one if I need it, but
I didn't even know people faxed anymore.
Literally, they would print it out and run it through the fax machine. It wasn't even an e-fax. So there are a lot of agencies that are still like that.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So that the 24/7 part's a little bit tricky. Most of my companies, they almost all of them offer 24/7 claims. So if your house burns down or you're in a bad accident, you can call them at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday or whenever, and they're going to have 24/7 claims. Some of them have 24/7 claim service or customer service too. So if you have a question and it's 2 a.m. on a Tuesday and I'm asleep, it gives you the opportunity to take care of that issue directly with the company. So we're trying very hard to sort that out. As I grow, I'll probably put 24/7 service, agency level service in place. But it comes at a pretty significant cost. So
Sure.
We'll cross that later on down the road. But that's the one thing that we pride ourselves on, customer service, but it can be difficult if all of the calls and work piles up at the same time.
So has that, just the thing you're talking about, just the sort of an inconsistency that can happen at times, how has this pandemic affected that? Has your business been have you been open the whole time?
So I have been. One of the things that I did very, very purposefully when I set up the agency was set it up to be, I can operate from anywhere. As long as I have an internet connection, I'm business as usual. I do have an office in Franklin. If you go there, you'll see on the door, it says by appointment. And the reason for that is even during non-pandemic times, I have a lot of community meetings and I do a lot of coffees and things like that outside of the office. So, I may not be in the office at the moment. I do have one. If people want to meet, it's available. Right now, I'm not doing in-person meetings unless it's really critical. In which case, then we'll grab coffee outside with our masks on and
Yes,
make it look as post-apocalyptic as we possibly can. But as far as the impact of COVID on my business, it's been minimal. I would say that the first 4 or 5 weeks following shutdown, it got kind of quiet. And I think it was just everybody had other things to do. They were hunkering down.
Right.
Home closings slowed down during that time period a little bit. I think everyone was trying to figure out how to do notaries if they couldn't meet in person. And then so once that got sorted out,
Yeah,
you
notaries,
know,
smoke certs, appraisals.
right,
And some of that's still going on. It's still in process trying to find the best practice in the midst of a pandemic.
right, exactly, yeah, exactly. So that obviously property makes up a good portion of my business. I have good realtor partners, good mortgage lender partners. So when that slows down, it slows down for me a little bit. I would say right now I'm about as busy as I've ever been. Home closings are going strong right now. Everything that was backlogged is now clearing out. And, for the mortgage lenders that's in refi business, my direction for review, obviously rates are stupid low right now. If you haven't already like locked in or found your house, Julie, hopefully you can help somebody do that soon before anything changes, because it's
I know. That's
there's
what.
nowhere to go but up here, right? So
Yeah, no kidding.
the mortgage lenders that are sending me the refi business to work on too it's through the roof. So it's been very good. I think I picked up some business. I had some folks call me that said, hey, um, my agent says that I have to go meet them in person to do this. Do you have another way to do it? And I'll say, well, yeah, because I haven't met a person in person to do that ever, because it's just not necessary, like that kind of thing. So it's been good. It's been
Okay,
good.
what about this?
Hmm.
So refis are up. What about, have you noticed an uptick at all in commercial stuff, as far as, because we had this conversation about a client of mine who they have small business loans to expand their business in this time to help them. So they're actually growing. Have you seen much of that?
I would say it's gone the other way on the commercial side.
Okay.
I've lost a couple of accounts because I've gone out of business. Restaurants, and it hasn't been a problem for the agency because I'm pretty spread in my industries. But one restaurant in particular I'm thinking of, they had a very good business. They were doing pretty well, but when everything got shut down, they're a Mexican restaurant with a bar. Most of their revenue was, tequila sales at
Oh
the bar.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
they were out that, and I think it helped when they started allowing takeout cocktails and so on. But the owner's like, hey, I have a big space with a big lease and a big bar, and I can't use it. And there's no amount of takeout. He's like, the food doesn't bring in that much money in a Mexican restaurant, right? And
Right.
so he said the takeout kind of like helped a little bit for a while. He said, in the takeout cocktails, but the difference is, like, for better or for worse, you might sell 2 or 3 or 4 margaritas to somebody on a Friday night. When they're doing a takeout margarita, they get one.
Right. Yep.
So he had to close. He had to close shop, and he won't be reopening.
That's
So I've had a
awful.
couple of folks like that. Anybody, transportation industry, I've got a nice account that they do like furniture delivery to your home, like white glove type deal. So when you order
Oh wow.
from Wayfair or somebody like that, and they offer the white glove delivery of the furniture to your home to set it up and put it where you want it and all that, that's what they do. And he's like, nobody wants me in their house right now.
Right.
So that's eased up a little bit. And he said, he goes, and people don't necessarily want to pay for white glove delivery if they're asking me to leave it on their doorstep. So they've managed to do okay. They just laid off they had some contracted workers, contracted drivers. So they laid them off and left just the company employees in place. But I think I'm seeing more of that kind of deal. And we're starting to see more of the delayed economic impact. So that's going to work its way through. But that being said, there are businesses that are expanding. I think more or less we'll call essential service businesses. I think they're going to do okay. Your auto shops, your doctors' offices, dentist offices, those kinds of deals, I think they're going to be in pretty good shape. And sometimes the best thing to happen to a well-run business is a downturn in the economy. It's painful in the short term, but a well-run business is going to survive that. And the businesses that are just kind of scraping by in the good economic times, they get filtered out, which I hate for them. I mean, I hate to say that, but the businesses that are set up for success end up with, coming out the backside of it with less competition, bigger market share, and in a better place. So, yeah, I'm not saying that's good. I'm not saying that's bad. That's just the way that it tends to work.
That's just what's going on. Yeah. So, okay, I'm gonna pivot just a little bit. What advice would you give to a younger version of yourself?
Sleep more, work less.
Wise words.
I mean, in retrospect, and you can't, sometimes it's hard, it's very, like, you can't learn this without experiencing it, right? Everybody thinks that they can do whatever, especially when we're young.
Invincible.
But if I had, there were times where I was putting in 70, 80 hours a week, work a week regularly. And, in retrospect, if I had, instead of sleeping 4 hours a night or 5 hours a night, if I had been sleeping 8 hours a night, 7 to 9 hours, I would have been more effective. I actually would have gotten more done. I would have been able to work less. Sometimes working less can get more done, right? It helps you focus on what's actually important.
Right.
Instead of going, man, I got another 2 hours of work, I'm just gonna quickly check Facebook and LinkedIn, and 45 minutes later, you're still scrolling through Facebook and LinkedIn and making the occasional comment, right? And then you look down, you're like, oh man, I still have 2 hours of work. I guess I should get started on that. But at this point in time, I'll just look a little more. Let's see what's on YouTube. So yeah, it's hard to stay focused and disciplined after a certain point. So you might as well just call it or take a nap or do something.
It is.
There you go.
When things come at me, sometimes I kind of feel like, oh gee, what was the movie? It's a kid's movie. Maybe it was Up. There was
yeah.
in it, and he just constantly distracted. Squirrel.
Yes.
I feel like that sometimes. Oh, there's another squirrel.
Yeah, and I mean, I could give a whole seminar on like work effectiveness and habits and things, and blocking time's important for sure. Turning off alerts and things like that. There are a lot of things you can do. One other thing that I would tell myself, probably would tell my 4-year-old self this as well. I think when we focus, I think we get tied up in what we want out of a conversation. Actually, we don't get tied up in what we want out of a conversation. We just get tied up in wanting to tell people what we think. And I think it's really important that, especially when you move into a managerial role or into a role where you're working with a customer on something important, like protecting their assets and income or finding them the perfect house, it's really important that we remember that we're not there to be right. We're there to get it right. And I find that when I keep that in mind, and I wish I'd learned that years and years and years ago, right? Because you can have somebody yelling at you, or you can have somebody that's frustrating you because they're not understanding what it is that you're trying to say, which, by the way, when that happens, that's a you problem, not a them problem, right? That's a communication thing.
Yep,
and it's
totally.
If I had realized early on, then, instead of me trying to be right and trying to explain why I'm telling them what they're doing or whatever else, if I just sat back and said, look, my goal is to get this right. So what are they trying to say? Like, I would have been less frustrated. I would have much easier time going through those conversations. Anyway, I digress. So you get the idea. Yeah, we're there
I absolutely
not to be
understand.
right, but to get it right. Yep.
What's your goal, and how can I help you get there?
Yeah, and I think sometimes people's goals aren't necessarily in their best interest either. And you have to figure out as a professional how to get what you want out of the conversation too, which is to hopefully give them a really good perspective
Mm-hmm.
from a professional standpoint, right? Um, so a good example would be, somebody that has assets and they have income and all of that's at risk if they're in a bad auto accident or something, right? But they want the cheapest possible insurance that they can. So, it's my role then to not give them necessarily what they want. It's to try and help them understand what their exposure is, and
The risks.
help them come up with the right information set so that they can make a decision that's informed and engaged. And then ultimately, if what they want, knowing what they need to know and having listened to and understood what they need to know, if then they decide that they want the cheapest thing ever, well, okay, that's on you. Here's a form that says that we talked about all this. Please sign down at the bottom. You know what I mean? But it's not about necessarily just giving somebody what they want, especially if they don't have the background to understand it.
Yeah.
That's like, when a 4-year-old asks you for something, like you go, wait a minute. And I'm not saying that my clients are 4-year-olds. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But they
No,
just
I
don't.
totally
But like a
understand that.
4-year-old doesn't have the context, right? They don't
Right.
understand that what they're asking for right now is too hot for them.
Right.
So you have to say, no, wait, no, I don't think that's actually what you want. Here, let me tell you what you're asking for. You're asking to get burnt right now. Is that really what you want? Well,
Right.
no, I just want the hot chocolate. So, yeah. All right,
I
I
feel like
digress.
I'm that
Now I'm
4-year-old.
rambling.
I'm that 4-year-old when it comes to insurance. I just,
Nah, now
it
you're
just
better than
makes,
most.
I mean, I've told you, it just makes my head spin. So I'm glad it's you and not me doing it.
That's okay. I'm a glutton for punishment. I mean, to put it in perspective, my first word was hot. And the reason it was hot was because I used to get out of the car and go back and touch the tailpipe.
Oh
I'd be
my
like, ow, ow,
goodness.
ow, ow. And every time I
Wow.
did it, my mom would say, hot, that's hot, that's hot. And finally I'd go back there and go, hot, hot, hot. So apparently I've always been some kind of masochist, hence the insurance.
My goodness. That's funny. That was you saying that, not me. Okay, professionally speaking, what was your worst day on the job ever? And how did you kind of deal with that and recover from it?
Worst day on the job ever. I mean, I think so. I had a really big deal that I put together that involved a lot of executive leadership. Like it went all the way up to the president of the company for
Mm-hmm.
approval, and it was a big deal with a big agency, and it was it was going to make the state numbers for everybody, and then the agency didn't do what they had agreed to do, and it it got kind of ugly. I mean, there wasn't like yelling and screaming and shouting or anything like that, not like that kind of a bad day, but in the end, as things developed, it became really clear that as a company we were basically getting screwed over by this deal. They were giving us accounts that were going to cost a lot of claims, and it was supposed to be a nice broad even section, right? So the company was supposed to gain a lot of customers and business, but it was supposed to be, some of it would be a little high risk and some of it wouldn't be, right? But what we ended up getting a lot of really, really high risk because they'd worked a side deal with another company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was a pretty bad experience. And I called our regional executive and was like, I think we need to cut ties with this agency. So we go from making everybody's numbers at the state to now it's like, I don't know if we're going to be able to make our numbers at the state at all this year because of my deal, right? And I have to
Yeah.
explain that to the other territory managers and to my state manager and to all that. And I was like, but the right thing for us to do is to part ways because they're not being honest with us. They're giving us false information, so on. So you get the idea. And how do I recover from it? You do the right thing. You communicate honestly. You be polite, and then you move on. You look to the next thing. And you remember that this is one out of many, many, many things you have going on. And it might have been a big deal, and it might have been a big paycheck, and it might have had all that, everything else associated with it. But in the end, still there's food on a table, a roof over a head, car in the driveway, kids that love you, and there's just so many other things that can go wrong that you just put it in perspective and you go, wow, that sucked. Did I learn something from it? Yeah, I probably learned a few things from it. Including how to be gracious as a region executive, because he said, you know what, I met with them too. Because they had me fooled too.
Wow.
So, and I thought that was a nice, and he's like, I'll call the company president and let him know what's going on, and I said, oh, okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Right.
And he's like, hey, and don't worry about it. I'm not going to throw you under the bus either. Like, it's not, this is one of those things that sometimes things just don't go like anticipated. And he said, we did decent due diligence on it. We basically just got skunked. He said, so he goes, I'll just do my best to make sure that agency never gets a company appointment from anybody that I know, like, ever again, type thing.
Right.
Like, that's the karma piece of it for them. And,
right.
So yeah, that's it. You put it all in perspective, and then you move on and you kick the next day in the butt and make it happen.
That's it. Keep moving forward. Just like, not to make another kids movie restaurant reference, but just
Dory.
Yeah, just keep
yeah. Just keep swimming. Yeah.
My daughter was watching that the other day, so that's in my head. What will your business look like 5 years from now? Just sort of.
I'll be retired, so who? No, I'm just kidding.
I'm thinking, from assuming that, we kind of get over the hurdle of this pandemic and life returns.
Yeah. Assuming we get back to some kind of normality. I mean, yeah. I think in 5 years, my business is relatively new in Massachusetts, right? I've been here for three and a half years, and I've been active as an agency really for about 2.5. Again, I've had 20 years of experience, so it's not a new thing, and I'm here permanently for anybody that wants to know or ask. Sometimes people go, "Hey, you've moved around a lot." I'm like, "Yeah, but I've got family. I'm here."
And you're very active in the community too.
Oh yeah. No, I love Franklin, and the surrounding towns are great too. Really.
Yeah.
So there's some things I want to do from an automation standpoint to really make sure that I'm staying in touch with my clients as the agency grows, and does it in a way that's personalized to them.
Right.
And bring the customer the technology that they need to make it feel like they have access to the same things you'd have access to at a really large company, but not at the cost of the personal relationship and having somebody that they can call that really has skin in the game.
Right.
So I think that'll be different. I'll have some staffing at that point in time, no question. Probably expand a little more. I'll probably do more life insurance than I do currently. I can certainly do life insurance. I like doing it, but it's not something that I've really focused on developing as a branch, if you will. I've stayed mostly on the P&C side, or property and casualty, for those watching. It's like homes and autos and things like that, businesses. So there'll be some growth and expansion in the agency there. I think more interesting to me is looking like 10 years in the future, because I think you're going to see some big changes in the industry itself.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think it's going to come on two fronts. I think the first one will be auto insurance, car insurance.
Mm-hmm.
When you have driverless vehicles, right, and autopilot and so on and so forth, auto accidents, once that gets sorted out, auto accidents will essentially drop to zero. Well, if you think about how an insurance company operates, right, most of the money they take in, they spend back out in claims. So what happens when you don't have those claims anymore, right? Does the industry just dry up? Do the auto manufacturers just cover the liability? Is there liability if you're in a car that's supposed to be driving itself and it gets into a wreck? Are you responsible for that? We don't know yet. These are all new questions. What we do know is we do know that the amount of claims that we'll pay will be significantly less than what they are right now, like as in single digit percentage of what they are right now.
Interesting. Wow.
And so insurance companies make a lot of money off of interest, right? The money comes in, the money goes out, but while it's there, it's an interest thing. So if they don't have that if they don't have that kind of cash flow, that revenue flow, the business model changes dramatically. So this is one of the reasons that you saw like Progressive, which was an auto-only company, pretty much. They went
Right.
out and they made sure that they bought a company that does home, right? So now they have Progressive Home nationally because they saw the writing on the wall. They had to set themselves up or they would be out of business. So I think that's going to be really interesting on the other side. On the other side of it, more on the commercial side, I think what we see from a regulatory and a legal standpoint will change a lot. And it started with September 11th. Because we saw companies say, listen, we can't afford to cover terrorism and terroristic acts under our policies, right? If you're in New York City and you're insuring those buildings, one thing to insure them against a fire, it's another to insure them against a bomb.
Right.
Like we can't do that. And on top of that, you get in commercial policies, when you cover a claim, you also cover a lot of times the business interruption costs. So if you're shut down, let's say there was something happened and your business wasn't really that damaged by it, or it wasn't damaged at all, but you have to close down for 2 months while they sort out the debris removal and everything else like we saw in New York. Well,
Right.
the insurance company has to pay for your expenses while you're closed because it would have been a covered loss.
Okay.
So what Congress did was Congress said, well, we're going to put TRIA in place, which is basically the Terrorist Insurance Reform Act. And they said, look, if a terrorist event happens, we're going to go ahead and pick up the tab or a portion of the tab or percentage of the tab as a federal government. So the insurance company said, okay, that's fine. Great. Yeah, we'll pay for it if you're going to reimburse us 80%. Yeah, no problem. We'll charge a percentage for it and off we go. So we've already seen that first step towards true government backing of large risk. And I think pandemic's another great example.
Yeah.
In general terms, and I need to be really clear, I'm not going to say whether one policy will or won't cover something. It's up to the company to interpret their policies and determine whether something is or isn't covered. And then if you disagree with it, then it's up to a court of law to determine precedent, so on and so forth. But in generally speaking, I'm not really aware of any companies or any major companies, at least, that are covering pandemic for the business interruption we talked about earlier. And some of them have it specifically excluded in the policy language. They did that after SARS in China.
Wow.
They said, whoa, this is going to be a problem if we really get something that spreads, and there's no real way to model for it. You can model for a hurricane because you know that by the time you're 30 miles inland, right, you have limited damage. You can model for
Right.
tornadoes because you're only going to have so many a year, right? You can model for earthquakes because you know where the faults are. You can't model for a pandemic because you don't know anything about the virus. You don't know anything about how it's going to spread. You don't know anything about how the government's going to react. You don't know anything about, there's no way to model for it. So there's no way to price for it. Since you don't know what your losses are, there's no way to price for it. And that's the problem on that one. So I suspect that we'll see more and more government influence in these things. For better or for worse, you can make arguments on both sides 100% on this one. But it's going to change the way that things look over the next 5 to 10 years. You're going to see more and more of those kinds of programs kicking in, and part of that has to do with the environment changing, where the expectation is that the policy is going to cover things that maybe it wasn't intended for. And previously, judges would have said, listen, that was never the intent of this policy. Like, it's pretty clear that it wasn't designed to cover like what it is that you're trying to cover. So we're going to back the company's position on this. Now they're talking about going so far as trying to invalidate things that are in the contract. Like if you have an exclusion,
Wow.
some states are pushing to, if you had the exclusion for business interruption for pandemic in the policy where it says pandemic and epidemic are excluded under this policy as a covered loss, and they're talking about invalidating that. So if
That's
that
scary.
happens, that it's really scary from an industry standpoint, right? And I totally understand the businesses that are struggling because of this and they have insurance, but the insurance doesn't cover that.
Right.
Insurance, no insurance policy covers everything. So it's a little bit scary if thinking about states and courts stepping in to potentially say, yeah, we know that you said that you don't cover it and you didn't price for it, but we don't really care, pay it anyway.
But,
Like that's
right.
that,
Yeah.
So we'll see how things develop long term, but those are the industry things that are more interesting to me over the next 5 to 10 years. And that's one reason why you want a really good and hopefully well-informed agent to help keep things on the rails for you. And
Absolutely. Okay, we're just about.
we're at time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have 2 more things that I want to ask you.
I'll keep my answers brief.
Yeah. What will you be reminded for? Excuse me. What will you be remembered for 100 years from now?
If you ask my kids, bad dad jokes.
So
I'm not sure I have an answer for that. Right now, I don't know. 10 years from now, I don't know. It's we'll have to figure out how we make a difference in the long term. Not many people are remembered 100 years down the road.
My husband and his siblings, they call them dadisms.
Dadisms.
Things that Dad was known for saying. And I don't know if I told you this, but this is my favorite dad joke this year. And some people have a delayed reaction to it. Why do we never see elephants hiding in trees?
I've heard this one, but I don't remember.
Because they're so good at it.
There you go. There you go. What do you get when you cross a cat with a monster?
I don't know.
A neighborhood without any dogs. All right, moving on.
Okay, last question, and then we'll wrap it up. What would people be surprised to know about you?
I mean, given what I do and my involvement in the community, I think most people would be surprised to know that my degree is in music composition. Not Berkeley level, though.
I was definitely surprised to hear that because I did not know that.
Yeah, I'm pretty analytically minded for the most part, but I definitely have my creative side too.
Do you still compose?
No, I have 3 kids.
Yeah.
and a business and community involvement. So unfortunately, I really haven't. I mean, since I left Memphis, I've done very little musically, which is too bad because it's pretty cathartic. I like playing. I like performing.
I don't do it, but my husband does. He's got his space down there with his instruments, and he actually, one of the things he really loves to do is handwrite the music. He handwrites the notes and everything. But that was awesome. So I just want to say thanks so much for taking this time. This was really fabulous. I'm so glad we finally put this on the calendar.
I know, me too. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it and enjoyed.
Everybody who's watching, thank you so much for taking the time to watch. And I will tag Greg and put his website link in, wherever I post this. So definitely give him a call, even if you want him to just look over your insurance. He's great about that, and he'll tell you you're good for coverage and what you're paying. It looks good, or he'll tell you you could get more coverage for the same money, or he'll look it over for you, and he'll be honest about it. And that's one of the things I love about Greg. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe and give me comments. And If you have any questions, if you'd like to know anything about the industry, talk to Greg, or if you'd like to see, if you would like another industry for me to interview, let me know. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Greg, for taking the time and being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you later. Everybody have a great day, and thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.